My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, looking at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, we find that he had a very humble beginning. As many of you know, that he ﷺ was orphaned at birth. His father passed away before he could see his own son. And in that time in Arabia, it was a huge disadvantage. A greater disadvantage than it is today. Because such a traditional society, the father, the husband, was head of household, primary caretaker, and more times than not, the only breadwinner for the family. And so, the Prophet ﷺ and his mother, Amina, were at a bit of a disadvantage. At the onset of his life, she, Amina, however, wanted to do the best that she could by her son. And so when it came time to enroll him in his first nursery, and what that means is to send the children out to the desert to be suckled and weaned, she went out with the women of the Quraysh to find someone that would take the Prophet ﷺ into their care. And this was a business, of course. There was money involved. It was a livelihood for those women of the desert. So they would come into the city and they would find families and they would look for an opportunity. Not only was it an honorable thing, but it was a way of life and it was a means to earn. And so they would look for families that had men that could provide them with the money required to take care of their children. So obviously the Prophet ﷺ was passed up by many, including Halima bin Sa'diyah, who herself was a very frail woman. And as it goes for wet nurses, the frailer you are, the less likely you are able to take care of another child. But you're going to look for a woman who has the apparent signs of milk production. She even turned away from the Prophet ﷺ knowing that he was orphaned, thinking there's no money here. There's nothing to be had. It's not a good business, not a good business opportunity. And so both the Prophet ﷺ was passed up, and Halima herself could not find anyone that would willingly give their child to her due to her physical condition. And she was going to leave and go back out to the desert empty-handed, but she thought at the last moment, I just can't do that. Let me take that orphan child, and at least I will not return home empty-handed. And so she did. She took the Prophet ﷺ. And immediately she began to see a number of miraculous things happen. She could barely take care of her own child, her own son. She could barely feed her own son, but when the Prophet ﷺ was in her lap, she began to fill up with milk so that he would drink and her son would also drink to their full, and there would be excess. And the boys, they would fall asleep. This was similar with the livestock of Halima and her husband. They had livestock as most of the Bedouins had. And that year was a very difficult year on the livestock. Many of them were going hungry. The female livestock were not producing milk as well, but the livestock of Halima were full, because that was what she, as the provider, was eating and drinking. That's where the nourishment of the Prophet ﷺ came, from that livestock. And so people took notice of that. It actually became the talk of the town, or the talk of the desert community. They were seeing that their livestock seems to be healthy and plump and full, while ours is emaciated and becoming sickly. And they would even try to mingle their herds with her herds in hopes that something would happen, but it was not destined. This is a real story of, as Allah says, وَعَسَى أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَى أَن تُحِبُّ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. It may be that you dislike something which is better for you, as it may also be that you love something which is evil for you, and Allah knows while you know not. Halima did not want the Prophet ﷺ in the beginning, but she ended up taking him. And then she realized the barakah that came with him, to the point that when it was time to return him ﷺ to his mother, she actually begged her. Halima, she begged Amina to keep the Prophet ﷺ for a longer duration, to extend the normal period. And she refused at first, but Halima was persistent and continued to beg. She did not reveal all of the barakah that she was receiving. Why would you turn in a good thing? Until the Prophet's mother, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reluctantly gave in and allowed Halima to keep the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for an extended period. Each of the prophets, they had a unique and miraculous story. Most of them began at the beginning of their lives. If you look at Adam alayhi salam, he was created by Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fashioned him with his own hands. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam discovered Allah in the home of an idol maker at a young age. Musa alayhi salam began his life, a miraculous story, in a journey along the river in a basket, and ended up in the house of the Pharaoh. Isa alayhi salam, his miraculous story began by speaking in the cradle as a newborn baby. Our prophet's miraculous story began out there in the desert with Halima and her family. And it had to do not with speaking or being thrown into a river, not with discovering Allah among idolaters, but it had to do with his heart. It had to do with the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ has the best of hearts. One of the companions of Ibn Mas'ud, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ نَظَرَ فِي قُلُوبِ الْعِبَادِ فَوَجَدَ قَلْبَ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ خَيْرَ قُلُوبِ الْعِبَادِ. That Allah looked at the hearts of the servants, all of them from the beginning to the end. Everyone to walk the face of the earth, he examined all of their hearts and found that the heart of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the best of hearts. It was a soft heart. Prophet alayhi wasallam was easygoing and lenient. As Allah says, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. He says, so by mercy from Allah, O Muhammad, you were lenient with them. And if you had been rude in speech and harsh in heart, they would have disbanded from about you. This goes to the description of his heart as a man, as he grew into a man and into a leader. He was soft-hearted and easygoing, lenient, pure of character, but in terms of tangibility, the purity of his heart began right there in the desert, as it was purified as a young boy. Narrated by Anas ibn Malik, who reported that Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he was playing. And he was playing with the children of the desert. Among them was the son of Halima bin Sa'diyah, his wet nurse. So the angel came and took hold of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, laid him down on the ground, and opened his chest. An open heart surgery would be the equivalent of what happened today. And removed this heart. He removed the heart of the Prophet ﷺ, and from the heart he removed a clot. And he said, هَذَا حَظُّ الشَّيْطَانِ مِنْكَ, a portion of this shaitan in your heart. He then washed the heart in a golden vessel with the water of Zamzam. There's many great lessons that can be taken from this story. The best of those lessons is the importance of the heart. Purity of heart. Of course, after having replaced the heart and closed his chest, the children that witnessed that, they ran home, frightened, screaming that Muhammad had been killed. And Halima, she went back and she saw the child, Muhammad ﷺ, who was now looking very different. His color had changed. And she became frightened herself, to the point that she wanted to return the Prophet ﷺ now after having begged to keep him. And she quickly took him home. And his mother Amina was a bit surprised, but she of course welcomed him back home. We can see from this was in preparation for the Prophet ﷺ's reception of revelation. The great Imam Ibn Hajar, he says this occurred during early childhood, so that the Prophet would grow up, not just become pure of heart at an old age or the age of maturity, but he would grow up pure of heart in the best of conditions, so that he would be just out of reach from shaitan. Brothers and sisters, this was done at the start of his life. The start of his life, because everything starts from the heart. Everything starts right here. Paraphrasing from the great Imam Ibn Rajab, rahimahullah, he said that the heart, it acts as the king commanding the army. The heart is the king. The king commands the army. If the king is upright and righteous, the army will reflect that righteousness. But if the king, however, is corrupt, then you can imagine how those soldiers will behave. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, أَلَا وَإِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ. That in the body there is a morsel of flesh, that if it becomes good, it is reformed and pure, the whole body will be good and will be pure. But if it gets spoiled, the whole body gets spoiled with it, and that is the heart, as reported by Imam al-Bukhari or Muslim. Now, back to the parable of the king, or the example of the king. The best way to take over a kingdom is not by brute force. You don't take your armies in there and you lose life and property and valuables. But the best way to take over a kingdom is to manipulate the king. If you can manipulate the king, you can control the army. You can convince the king. You can control and convince the army to do whatever it is that you want. And this is the same as the heart. If you can sway the heart left or right, the desired actions are just around the corner. And this is how the shaitan approaches the servant of Allah. The shaitan does not come hammering away at you, beating at you, physically maneuvering you, but he comes and whispers into the heart. And he tries to enter the heart through temptation. He's constantly trying to find an opening in the heart to corrupt it and spoil your faith. He tries to play on our innermost vulnerabilities, our innermost weaknesses like doubt and desire. He tries to unlock the doors of jealousy, anger, and lust. He tries to force his way through the doors of greed and evil assumption. Understanding the condition of the heart, understanding how our hearts are working, will help us understand why it is we do what we do. Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah said that the honorable soul, meaning the one with an honorable and pure heart, is only pleased with the loftiest of aims, that which is most virtuous and praiseworthy in the end, has the best outcome. The pure heart is interested in that. They're only happy with that. Lofty things, noble pursuits. Whereas the lowly soul, the one whose heart has been corrupted and riddled with disease, hovers over that which is inferior and falls into it like flies into excrement. And therefore, the honorable and lofty soul is not pleased with oppression, immoral behavior, thievery, or treachery. They're simply above it. Their hearts are simply too pure to find joy or satisfaction in such pursuits, whereas the lowly and despicable soul is the exact opposite. Thus, as he says, everyone is inclined to that which matches their soul. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضاه ونصلي ونسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن خير الزاد التقوى. My dear brothers and sisters, over 54 million Americans paid for gym memberships in 2014. 54 million Americans have a gym membership. They paid the fees. Whether they went or not is another story altogether. How many of you have a gym membership somewhere? And we know they range from first class service down to the average Joe's gym. I'm willing to bet a lot of us have gym memberships. And then in 2015, the actual visits to the gym exceeded 5 billion. How many times did Americans go to the gym over the year? 5 billion times. The average number was 100 times a year. That was an all-time high, according to statistics. Membership has been on the increase. It grew from 2008 to 2014, it grew by 18%. It's not a bad thing. People are interested in health, physical health, interested in well-being. Believe it or not, in the United States, there are 34,000 fitness centers. 34,000 fitness centers. And as of 2014, it generates $24.2 billion in revenue. That's here in the United States. Globally, there's 180,000 fitness centers, estimated to have earned $84 billion from their 145 million members. That's saying something. Question is, what's the price of a fit and healthy body? How much are you willing to pay to get in shape? $10 a month? $40 a month? $50 a month? $100 a month? Are you willing to pay a private trainer much more than that a month? How much time are you willing to invest in your physique and physical health? Do you go 100 times a year, spending an hour or more each time? You go once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week or more. You can spend between an hour to 5 or 6 a week, depending on how dedicated you are. Now, I'm not downplaying the importance of physical health and well-being. Not at all. And we've discussed that here in the past, the importance of being physically capable and healthy. And it's one of the great blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that many people squander, they do not take advantage of. In fact, sometimes they abuse their health. But I want to draw your attention today to one simple fact. As the Prophet ﷺ, he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى أَجْسَادِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ. Allah doesn't look at your physique. He doesn't look at your shapes and sizes. وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ. He looks at your hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at your hearts. And being that that is the location that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will examine, we should understand that it's the most valuable thing that we possess as His faithful servants. The most valuable thing that we possess as human beings is our heart. The spiritual heart, that is, as it is the seat of faith and the ultimate source of salvation. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهِ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. It's the day when there will be none benefited by wealth nor children, but only those who come to Allah with a sound heart. With a sound heart. No wealth, no children, no physique, no physical health, but the heart. So let's ask another question. What's the price for a pure heart? The Prophet ﷺ, he went through surgery. It was removed and cleansed by an angel in a vessel from paradise from the water of Zamzam. That's the Prophet ﷺ. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't find such an operation available. Wouldn't that be easy? We could all just save up a little money and go for such operations to purify our spiritual heart and just be outside of the reach of shaitan, but that's not the case. Our challenge is to go about it in a very different way. So how much would you be willing to pay for a pure heart? How much time do you think you would be willing to invest? Because look, just like physical health, being in shape, it takes money, as we know. It takes millions and billions of dollars around the world, and facilities and professionals and trainers to help you get in shape and take care of your body, to be healthy. It takes your time, it takes your effort, your dedication, and your patience. And it also takes your resources, your financial resources to do that. And we are doing it. What about our hearts? What about our hereafters? And so, what I'd like you to do today, for the better part of your day, think about your heart. Assess your heart's condition. And try and answer those questions. What is it worth to you? What is a pure heart worth to you? What is salvation worth to you? Think about that throughout the week. And in the Fridays to come, bi'idhnihi ta'ala, we will begin addressing this very important topic and highlighting some of the diseases of the heart and their cures. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purify our hearts and root them firmly in faith. We ask that He guide our hearts to that which is lofty and virtuous and steer us away from everything which is lowly and vile. نصلي ونسلم على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.